Welcome everybody to another week of Game Wisdom Live. This is the week of September 7th, 2017. Joining me again is streamer Robert Leach.
Hello.
Hey Rob, how are you doing?
I am good. How are you doing?
I am doing fine. It's been a busy week. I've been doing some temporary work during the morning, so it's left me with a little bit of sleep deprivation, but only one more day, and then
Yep.
next week I do my first presentation for fall. So
And that is awesome.
I am really excited about that. I've also been thinking about finally joining the modern world with getting a smartphone because I'm going to be making use of Uber probably to get around to the various presentations.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to decide what I want to get, and of course, the plan, the phone, all that crazy stuff all the young folks have already figured out by now.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, Gordo, how are you doing tonight? But other than that, it's been a pretty interesting week. We are now the YouTube channel. Last I checked, I think we just about hit, I want to say 2260, although it could be a little bit less since I last checked. Let's see. We are at 2268, so not bad. We're getting close to 2300.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we are getting up there. Get one with a decent camera. I just want to get. I don't even know what I'm looking for when it comes to smartphones, so we'll have
Yeah.
to see. But I will certainly be trying to join things. I found that Uber has a website that you can also do the scheduling of rides and such if you don't have a smartphone. So I'm going to be testing that out, see how that works. And I'm also going to try and get over to. I think I'm going to check out either T-Mobile or Metro PCS over the weekend and see what they can offer me in terms of plans and such. Because I'm
Yeah.
really only going to use a phone for traveling and maybe download a game to try out for the site. So it's not exactly like I'm going to be on my phone 18 hours a day like everyone else is, I guess, these days.
Well, you got to check out a lot of the games. I mean, some
hmm
of the biggest money-making games in the world right now.
I mean, I can get hooked on a Candy Crush saga right there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But in terms of other things that's been going on, still trying to figure out what to do in terms of the Discord channel and the Patreon. If you missed the announcement video, I've set some new goals up for the month of September. If we can hit $100, I will do a Let's Play or live stream of Resident Evil 7 for of course, the horror month, and maybe we can throw in Alien Isolation in as well. Still looking for some suggestions for things to offer, and this was something that I brought up that you were telling or you were suggesting earlier too, Rob. Oh wait, one
Oops.
second. Did I not raise? Let me try it. That should be better. I just raised
Okay.
Rob's
Test,
gain up on my end.
testing. Let us know.
Okay. But as I was saying, you were suggesting to me earlier about maybe opening up the Discord channel and leaving it open and maybe having reward tiers for additional functionality, like a moderator, exclusive chat room, or voice channel, stuff like that. So I want to get your thoughts for people watching this either live or recorded. What do you think? I posted this on Twitter, but I don't think I explained it well enough. But the idea is to.
Yeah.
You're a little louder than me. Let's try equal and see what happens, or close equal. But the idea is to either have the Patreon or still have the dollar to get you into the Discord channel, or turn that off, and then I'll just post a Discord channel here, and then we'll have the $5 or $10 tier kind of be like VIP status or stuff like that. So, like I said, I'm not sure which way to go with it just yet. So hopefully we can get some suggestions or comments from the folks here, or for anyone watching this recorded. So please let me know what you're thinking, because if there's enough interest in the Discord channel just to get people in there, I don't mind taking the dollar off and then just having reward at $5 or at the $10 tier and going with it from there. But again, it's going to be up to people, or I'll have to just make some kind of official determination in a week or so.
Yeah, I've been using Discord a lot lately.
Mm-hmm.
I've got several channels that I keep tabs on, including yours, and a few chats on the side and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty good.
I was just telling a friend of mine. This was a previous podcast guest, Trayvon Taylor, he's working on the game Bullock Mayan Warfare. Let's see, this is better for a lower tier. Eh, Yeah, and that was the other thing about having a dollar tier, just to as like a small gatekeeper. But like I said, let me know what you think. But I was telling Trayvon about Discord as a way, as like an easy way to have like a private channel so people can join, as long as they don't you don't give out the link, anyone can get into it. And even then, like with our channel here, if it gets too crazy, I can actually just change the invite link and use that instead of just leaving the old one in all the videos.
Yeah, and you can put in timed links, so you can give a link out to just a few people, and then if after a while it just goes away.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, like I said, any any suggestions regarding like the goals or the rewards, I am always open. So please let me know in the comments or on these live chats. But like I said, for the Patreon, if you want to see the Resident Evil 7 live play for next month, we need to hit at least $100 for the Patreon this month. I think we're like $55, $56 right now. So hopefully we'll get some interest in it. But let me see. Oop, did you just say something, Rob?
Yeah, sorry, I'm trying to mute so that a lot of the background noise doesn't go through.
That's all right. But yeah, like I was saying, this Tuesday will be my first live presentation for the fall season. I'm still waiting to hear back from the other library system. I just sent her another message just to see what's going on. So fingers are crossed on that front. Now, I guess one thing that was very interesting, I put in for verification status on Twitter, and I have not heard anything back. I did about it will probably be a week as of tomorrow, so I'm not sure if it's a good sign or a bad sign that I haven't heard any updates regarding it.
Yeah, I wish I knew more about that particular side of the Twitter realm.
Mm-hmm. But other than that, we're going to try and keep it to about like an hour, maybe a little bit more for tonight, because I do have a little bit of streaming to do, and then I have to get to bed for an early wake up tomorrow, and then we'll be back to business as usual. So we got some very interesting topics this week to talk about. And the first one will definitely have to be about the whole Cuphead debate and what it means to be a game journalist, because that's always a very popular topic that comes up it feels like it comes up like once every like 2 to 3 months now. So, if you missed the announcement or my video discussing it the other day, what happened was a game journalist for VentureBeat put up a video of him playing Cuphead, and it was a bit of a cringe fest to watch. And people have been comparing it to the Doom 2016 video from Polygon. And it's caused a whole lot of uproar, from some people saying it's a developer's fault because the tutorial is bad. And then some people saying it's the game journalist's fault, he's horrible, why is he reviewing games? And it's still being talked about, I think, as of earlier today on Twitter. I was still seeing people mentioning it. And it certainly kind of like grew into this whole ball of annoyance, I think, all the way around. But I guess to start off with, what do you think about what's going on, Rob?
I after watching, we discussed it a little bit last week, and then you put the link on Discord, and I watched the entire thing, all 26 painful minutes of it, and then of course I watched your breakdown, and it is interesting because I did not even consider the tutorial aspect at all. All I could see was, oh my God, what is going on here? Mostly because I expect someone who is in that journalism area to have some kind of core competency, or at least, as you had mentioned in your video, the ability to have audio and discuss what it is they're going through. So in that tutorial section, you see him kind of jumping around at random, and he could say, hey, look, and say some of the things you said, like it needs to be in this particular order, or there needs to be better direction as to what I'm supposed to do. The jump and then dash thing in particular was a great point, and that was something that he could have mentioned while he's doing it. It's like, hey, how do I know that I'm supposed to do jump dash? And even if I'm familiar, like how many people are actually familiar with dash who is a first-time platformer? So there's a lot of things he could have spoken through. And then one of the first things that he did when he was on the map was talk to the person multiple times, the AI character or the NPC, and just getting the same thing. Once you do it twice, I mean, there's You don't need to do it a third time. You know that there's no more text. So just little tiny things got on my nerves about just watching it. But honestly, like the tutorial aspect, I felt your video really did open up a lot of detail that I just kind of was already annoyed with. I didn't feel like reading into much of that video anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that was kind of the thing that I'm hearing like all different thoughts of on Twitter and such. And I know one of the people on our Discord channel would brought up some very interesting questions about what does it mean to be a game journalist, and should you be good at video games to get into like that side of things. And this is where I think I do have some problems with some of the opinions I've been hearing about on Twitter. Like for me, like I would say like one of the most frequent things I hear, especially from other journalists, was them defending the play, saying you don't need to be good at video games to be a game journalist. And just as El Gordo just said, you could expect a journalist to have knowledge about his area. Like that's kind of the thing. Like where is the line in terms of skill? Because, like I said in my video, like the tutorial had some problems with it. Like that I would agree with, and I'm sure plenty of developers who are watching it would agree with that part. But then when you watch him actually play it, like it's very hard to see that as a new player. Because did you ever watch the Polygon Doom 2016 video, Rob?
No, I heard you talking about it, and I should have run right out and watched it because that's something that would have interested me a great deal. You had mentioned he will walk, stop, look, and shoot all as separate actions. I think that that would be all kinds of fun to get into.
Yep, and that was kind of like the point that I was thinking about with the Cuphead. Like there is footage of someone playing a game for the first time, but then there's someone who it looks like has never touched a video game before. And I was just watching. I mean, even if I was playing a game brand new, there's still some basics, like in terms of being able to perform two actions at the same time. And just like watching that video going, like, what is happening here? And I think this is what drives a lot of people crazy, and especially about the whole idea of, can you trust game journalists? And this is like the part that I keep hearing from Twitter that was kind of getting on my nerves, is people coming out defending it by saying you can be bad and be a games journalist. I'm like, wait, what? Like, this is the part that was starting to irk me a little bit. That I'm not saying you have to be 360 no scope 24/7 on Call of Duty, but if you're going to cover a video game, I expect you to have some semblance of skill, enough to at least show the game off in whatever light respective light is supposed to be. Like, I was thinking about this, and I think I mentioned this on our Discord channel, but it's like if I'm running an automotive magazine or automotive website, am I going to send someone who has never ridden a motorcycle before to a motorcycle to showcasing off the latest Harley or Indian motorcycle? Like, what value would that give? And it's the same thing, I think, here with video games. Like, if I'm going to show off a video game or show it off for like a professional site, I would expect the person playing it to at least understand what's going on. And like I said in the video, if there was audio and we could hear what's going through his head, it would give me some value. It would give the developer some value. But just watching someone flail around and, oh my goodness, it's still, I can feel my heart rate going up just thinking about it again. Like, it just serves no real function. And El Goro brought up what was going to be my next point. The other problem with this is that it hurts the video game. Because what if someone who's never seen Cuphead or sight unseen Cuphead watches that video and thinks, well, this game is horrible, look how much trouble this guy's having, he's supposed to be a professional journalist, what hope do I have? And that's the other point. If you have someone who has no business, and I know there have been many examples of this in the whole game journalism field, of people covering video games who've either had no experience with the series or no experience with the genre, if they give a professional review, that becomes associated with that game. And of course, it drives a lot of people crazy when you see, like, of course, my go-to example when IGN gave like God Hand a 2 out of 10, and it was such a painful thing that they had to go back and redo the entire review over again.
Yeah, I know one thing that I had brought up, and that is the word professionalism.
Hmm.
Now, for a long time, having been in this industry for 15 years, like I have always said, I don't really need someone to be, have a hardcore love of games to
Hmm.
get in this business. But the aspect of professionalism has to be there, which to me, especially in journalism,
Hmm.
requires you to go and learn everything you can about what you're doing. So let's say you're not a platformer. Let's say you're not even into that kind of game or that kind of 2D animation looking thing. Um, I would still expect you to go out and play and learn and figure out all these elements. And if I'm listening to that video, if there are problems with the controls, I'd expect someone to use terms like sticky or something like that, so I know why he's having so much trouble. Like the aiming is bad, or this lock-on mechanism is terrible. I don't like eight directions. Um, that is the kind of thing that I would get a lot out of. And I feel like someone who plays any kind of game at all would also get some stuff out of, because we all speak a very similar language. And if you don't know that language, yeah, you shouldn't be a games journalist. But I do think that someone who's just a journalist
Hmm.
could come in and do it, but they would have to really go out and learn it. Like
Hmm.
as an example, I didn't have any expertise at game. Like I had to do a SpongeBob SquarePants game. I had to do a bunch of Disney princess games. The first thing I did when I got on those, I went and watched every single SpongeBob SquarePants show. Two, I went and watched all those Disney princess movies because I wanted to know the IP. And I studied the IP that Disney gave me, and I studied all the lingo. I had to write content for the SpongeBob SquarePants game, and going through that and really making sure I knew everything in the intricacies and stuff, that was very important. And if someone doesn't do that for reviewing a game, I have to question, what's wrong? There's something wrong here. I don't know if it's the
Yeah.
game, I don't know if it's the person, but I wish I had more information.
Yeah, and that is a really good point. I also want to bring El Gordo's question because I think this will lead us into our next part. He said the same thing also be said about professional review. Should a person that doesn't like a particular genre review a game about said genre? And this is where things get very tricky because I've heard things from both sides. I've heard people say that you want someone brand new to review a game so you get the outsider's perspective. But then on the other hand, I hear people say, no, you want someone familiar with the genre who can walk you through what's going on with it, or be able to explain to you why this is a good or bad example of it. So, what do you think about that, Rob?
Um, this always leaves me. I remember so clearly. I forget which magazine. So I not obviously not that clearly. It might have been PC or might have been PlayStation. Doesn't matter. This gal, this journalist, was doing a review of the latest Final Fantasy game. It might have even been 12 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And the review is always at the top. The numbers are always at the top, and it was a 10 out of 10. And all I could think was this better be a damn good game, because 10 out of 10 is rare in that kind of in journalism in game
Mm-hmm.
reviews. The first thing she said was, um, I am a bit of a Final Fantasy geek, but this game really is a 10. And to me, that just said, well, maybe get someone who's just like a fan of RPGs as opposed to just Final Fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
A 10 out of 10 in terms of role playing games, that's one thing. But a 10 out of 10 in terms of games as a whole, well, that's something else. Like you can say, I heavily recommend this game. This is one of the best RPGs I've ever played in this particular, scope of things. But to equate it with what is games that are generally considered as best ever, I don't think you're going to find Final Fantasy 12 on that list. So that was the kind of thing that I feel like there was some lost perspective. I think that the wrong person, like you said, you want an outsider's perspective, you want an insider's perspective. This was purely insider's perspective. It was purely someone who already was leaning towards this game being good. And I feel like you need that opposite,
Mm-hmm.
the someone who's not necessarily looking to hate the game, but someone who's has a bit of an outside perspective, someone who can step back, say, hey, as someone who's not that familiar with RPGs or vaguely familiar with RPGs, is this one I absolutely should buy, or should I find something else?
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of money. $60 is a lot of money to spend on an RPG. So that's the kind of information I'd want out of an actual review article.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's always that challenge of how far do you go in the fan base to have someone review that game. Because if you have someone who is like the hardcore Call of Duty fan or the hardcore Battlefield, or you can insert AAA franchise, they're going to be far more lean or far more nice on the any kind of problems or anything like that, or they may not try to explain like why you should buy it. But then there are genres like what we mentioned with something like Cuphead. Like when you have games that are designed around a very specific fan base, such as Cuphead, Dark Souls, or even something like XCOM, you need to have someone there who knows what's going on. Like, we're not saying you need to be 100%. I can be XCOM 2 on Legend Iron Man difficulty and not have any of my squaddies die. But you should be able to. You should at least have a background in that franchise and understand what's new and what's different. Like, and I think for like me, I think that's where I kind of like want to draw the line on what it means to be a professional game journalist. Because I think the word professional, I think, is a very big deal. Like some people say, oh, you can be YouTubers can play video games bad. Why can't game journalists? Well, a YouTuber isn't getting paid by a major website or doesn't have like a major credit to their name compared to someone who is billing themselves and calling themselves a professional video game journalist. Like if you have that title associated to you, you do have to step it up on that front. Or at least that's what I think.
No, absolutely. I agree 100% there. You really are representing something that's a little bigger than you. And if you are just like for me, when I'm a Twitch streamer, I don't even pretend to be like your epic professional Twitch streamer. I just enjoy playing games and chatting with the people who like watching them. So that's one thing. But if I was a professional streamer or someone like you who provides content across a variety of media and you have a very specific thing you focus on, which is knowledge of games, well, then you're going with an expectation of what you're going to get. And if you go to the PC Mag or if you go to PlayStation Magazine, well, you're kind of hoping that these people have done this before and are reviewing it from a very particular standpoint because they're the people who are essentially telling you how to spend all your money. And that's supposed to be the core of it, really. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
And as Algorithm says, some YouTubers can and have allegedly received money, and that is another whole quagmire in of itself to talk about.
Yeah.
Now, with the idea... Oh, and here's a bit of a follow-up. I didn't mention this in the video, but this is, I think, strike number 2 or 3, I think, for this whole video. The guy from VentureBeat, Dean... I forget his last name. Takahashi or something like that. Like, people were defending him saying, oh, he's a professional game journalist. He's written books. He's been covering games for 20 years. And then on his preview that he put the video up on the website, he first called it saying that this was developed by the Super Meat Boy developers, not Studio MDHR, which if you would have taken 10 seconds to Google Cuphead, you would have seen that was the name, that was the developer. So, and like this is the point about why this is bad, or why a professional game journalist needs to have that level of competency, because why should I trust anything he says going forward? Like someone was saying he wrote 2 books on game development. I'm like, but if he can't play a simple, or if he can't even follow basic instructions, why should I give any credence to anything that he says in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. And now I am very impressed by people who write books, and I feel like that is a generally accepted thing, and that's why when someone says he wrote a book, well, then that automatically gives them like some credentials. But at the same time, these days it's very easy to get a book out there, and to say someone wrote a book is not necessarily the glowing thing that once was. And I feel like you have to take that into account. And just because you wrote a book on games, well, it doesn't mean that it's true. It doesn't mean that it even applies to this particular game. So certainly it's a credential. Certainly it's something to be proud of. Certainly it's something to require someone to be a little bit impressed by, but it doesn't adhere to this particular circumstance. You can't just give someone a pass because they wrote a book. They have to be accountable for that particular thing because they're putting it out there as a professional, and that to me is something that's a little bit sacred. But it's really hard to distinguish these days.
Yeah, definitely. And we've said this before too, that there really aren't any true standards for what it means to be a game journalist. And the problem is that a lot of the people who become game journalists either come from the outside from a writing point of view, or they come at from the YouTuber side that gets into the journalist from that point. And like someone did say something on Twitter that I do agree with. There is a difference between playing a game really well and being able to write about video games very well. And I think that is certainly true. That just because you are a hardcore gamer doesn't make you the best game journalist, and the same goes for vice versa. But again, it raises that question. Should there be a bar that you need to clear in order to call yourself a game journalist? Because again, whenever we talk about establishing some measure of standards, it drives everyone up a wall. Whenever we try to say, well, maybe a video game should have this, or maybe you should know so and so.
Well, I don't think that. I mean, anyone can call themselves whatever they want. I mean, at some companies that I've been at, they're like, yeah, give yourself whatever title you want. And it's like, okay, well, that just completely demeans what it is I do there. But you can call yourself a journalist. I mean, what I mean by that is anyone can call themselves a journalist. But I feel like the differentiator is where you do that journalism. Are you doing it for a major website? Are you doing it for yourself and you're building a brand, or are you just someone out there who's writing who just wrote a couple of blogs or whatever, and therefore you're a journalist? And nothing against those people who are just getting started, but there's no credentials there, and you have to earn that. And that's really, I mean, as a viewer, as a reader, that's kind of what I like to do. I like to dig into someone a little bit and say, okay, how much of a grain of salt do I need to take this with? And if they've only got a couple, well, I'm going to look around a little bit more. And if I find this person's trustworthy, I'm going to start following them. And that's how someone builds a base. But if someone's already got a strong base and they start doing something like that, well, you got to start dinging them a little bit and say, hey, up your game again. You're starting to slack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as Otis says, but you can't name yourself a lawyer and start doing law. But it's just very tricky. For a lot of the people I saw on Twitter saying, just be bad at video games, and if you love them, you can be a journalist. I'm like, no, you still have to, as you said, Rob, there still has to be some professional standard. And I think for a lot of people, we see this whenever these issues come up, that they only go to the extreme ends. The people who say, he's horrible, the game is great, and then people saying the tutorial is horrible, he's perfectly right. And it's not really that kind of situation. I mean, there's issues on both sides, like I showed in the video. But even then, I still have to lean towards him being a lot more at fault, just due to, again, that basic competency at playing the game. And again, I don't expect you to be uber player at this. My friend Josh was telling me, with Riot Games, to get any job at Riot, you need to prove you hit a certain level of ranking in League of Legends. They will check your Elo score in League of Legends whenever you try to get a job there. I don't see things to be that far, but I expect you to be able to play the game to the point that you can explain to me what's good and bad about it. I was reading his preview on VentureBee about it, and he was like, so this game is so punishing, and I kept dying. I'm like, yeah, because you weren't shooting the enemies, you kept running into them. And it was just driving me crazy. Here's an example for me. With XCOM 2, I've been playing War of the Chosen, and I am not the best XCOM 2 player. Chances are I won't be finishing my the second hardest difficulty on Iron Man. I don't think I'll be finishing that campaign before I write my review. But I understand the mechanics and the systems enough from playing all the XCOMs and digging into this one that I can write a review and explain what's new and how this game plays. Am I going to need to beat the game on Legend? No. But at least I understand enough that I can explain to someone what is about, what is and doesn't work, or what does and what doesn't work.
Yeah, and I think that drives that point about doing some research. One, as an XCOM fan, you've already got that research behind you. Mm-hmm. But if you're coming in fresh, if you're coming into Cuphead fresh, you better know what it means to be a hardcore platformer, because there's easy, certainly, then there's hard, and then there's the extreme hard stuff we've spoken about in the past.
Mm-hmm.
This seems to be somewhere in the middle. And I mentioned this on the Discord. I was going to let my wife watch, and she did. And all she could say is, "Why aren't you moving? Why aren't you going? Why do you keep going backwards?" Like these are things that she's not even a platform player. She knows it because it's basic.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is, you can't say, "Boy, this game is hard," if you keep doing these basic things incorrectly.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is what makes watching that play painful. And if he had the voice thing, as you've mentioned many times in your video, if he had just been talking, he could have explained, okay, so this is why I feel like this is way too hard. Like these guys keep falling at random, that's why I keep hitting them. Well, I watch it, I'm like, yeah, they keep falling at random. That's why you have to keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess my point is, he didn't do the research. If he plays platformers at all, it didn't show through. If he doesn't play platformers, it did not look like he did any research into anything, even as simple as Mario, which is what everybody is most familiar with as a platformer, and it has all the basics that are there in this game. So I don't feel like there's any excuse for what he did.
Yeah. And like I said in my video, like, there were problems with the tutorial. I wasn't expecting him to be able to easily do the dash command or the parry slap and the advanced maneuvers. But the basic stuff, like as you just said, like the stuff that has been ingrained in all of our heads from years of playing, and for someone who again says he's been doing this for over 20 years, like this is kind of like saying that I review cars, but I don't know how to use a steering wheel, or I don't know how to work pedals in a car.
And that's a great analogy, by the way.
Thank you. And that's what's driving me nuts with the people defending it, saying, "Oh, you can be as bad as you want in video games, and you can, play them to your heart's content." I'm like, okay, but then what kind of knowledge are you going to give me when I'm trying to say whether or not I want to play this game? And again, like, I'm not expecting you to 100% this or platinum Bloodborne, but if you can at least play it at the competent level, how can I take value in anything that you write about this game?
Yeah.
And I'm sure we'll keep hearing about this until the game is released at the end of September. So, and for those of you watching this right now, when Cuphead comes out, I will certainly be playing that game. Chances are I will either play it for like a good month, or I will probably like finish it in like 1 or 2 nights of me just straight playing it through.
I mean, it's a really amazing aesthetic. Like that genre of animation. I mean, I've been in animation for a long time, and that just blows me away. The music, the filter of the old school on it, and
yeah, I love like that big band soundtrack.
Oh God, that's great! It is. It's really it's fabulous to watch, and I wish that was another reason I wanted the voice on there, so he could comment on how amazing this stuff is, or how much he hated it. Like either way, give me something to base my decision on.
Mm-hmm. And like for myself, I have obviously, I'm sure you know Looney Tunes, right, Rob?
Oh, of course, yeah.
They have the Golden Collection that they put out on DVD a few years ago from Warner Brothers. It's basically like collecting from the vault. So they have like 10 hours of Looney Tunes classics on DVD. I own all 6 editions of it. So I have like, oh my goodness, I don't even know how many Looney Tunes episodes. I love that old school animation. And I love great. Looney Tunes like that. So someday, maybe, I don't know, if I ever have free time, you just sit there for like a day and watch nothing but Looney Tunes. But yeah, I love that animation, and oh my goodness, we could just probably transition this into like an animated series talk if we're not careful.
I did want to comment really quick on El Gordo's comment about how gaming can be considered for kids even these days. It can be seen as a very childish thing, and therefore nothing associated with it is very serious at all. And that I feel like has been something that has plagued this industry for many years, and I don't know how many people have to be gamers for it to change course. I mean, how many adults have to be gamers for this to change? That's my big question, because it's mostly everybody now. I don't know what we're waiting for.
I mean, I can see that as an uphill battle for myself, trying to present myself as a professional, and someone saying, what do you do differently compared to someone like PewDiePie or Markiplier or insert, the hundreds, if not thousands, of people on YouTube who cover video games? And it's hard because a lot of people will see a video game and they'll just immediately tie to something like what a big name YouTuber does of them just like screaming and playing games. And like I see a lot of games that are basically just like, quote unquote, like YouTube bait. It's a game like a bunch of wacky stuff, and you see like a person in the corner going, "Oh my god, this is happening! Ah, it's so fun and exciting." But to me, that's just like akin to like reality TV or lowest common denominator stuff. Like I'm still waiting for the day that we see like someone cover Stardew Valley or talk about Undertale on TV. I mean, that would definitely be a very interesting day.
Yeah, and I feel like certainly there is a place for that. It's very entertaining. It's like the whole shock jock thing. I mean, that's how that came about, is because it's very entertaining radio. But there is like, it's like Siskel and Ebert back in the day, and then how that evolved. But they were very serious movie reviewers, and there was an era of people who were very serious movie reviewers that could be taken very seriously, and their opinion was held very highly. And a lot of newspapers do the same thing. They have a very solid movie reviewer. But then you start going across the internet and you see people who are very wacky movie reviewers. And I believe there is a place for all of that. But you got to know the difference when you're looking at someone like you who's very much picking apart stuff from the perspective of a gamer, of someone who's studying games, who's really taken them apart, and that's your life, is being studious, as opposed to someone who's being entertaining. Knowing that difference, I feel like, is a key component of comparing anybody on YouTube, because the extremes are huge, and it's really hard to figure out these days what you're supposed to expect and what you're not supposed to expect. Like, when someone watches one of your things, they might be like, "Hey, why aren't you being wacky? Where are those strange sound effects and the crazy clips?" Well, you're going here to learn, basically.
Yeah. Well, I've gotten comments from people in the past saying, "You're the only YouTuber I've seen covering this game that isn't, screaming and making wild faces while they're trying to play it." Yeah, and El Gordo makes a really good point about how esports seems to be on the front for being serious, because there is big money in esports. I think last year's, I think League of Legends or Dota 2, I think the prize was like at $5.5 or $6 million, and the fact that we're seeing this now being covered on TV. I see it on the Disney Channel. They've been doing some esports, and of course, E-League on TBS. I mean, that is true. Like, we are actually seeing, and again, this isn't just, amateur hour, or, people just wildly streaming playing Street Fighter. These are the top players in the world showing what master level play of these games is like.
And to me, one of the biggest things that brings esports into that acceptable area are the commentators, because they aren't just people talking about someone playing a game. They are discussing at a very rapid pace all the detailed stuff that's going on at any given second. And you may not understand, like, I don't understand half of it these days, even still, but like, it is easier to follow. Excuse me. It's easier to follow. It is easier to grasp the complexity and the skill required to play these games, just watching it and listening to these guys. And I feel like that is such a big deal. The money as well, being in there. But yeah, people know what sports are. People know how competition works. And El Gordo makes that great point, because sports can be integrated from this nerd place to, accepted across all spectrums.
And I think if anything's going to be that big push, I think esports is definitely going to be up there. Maybe a close second or third could be speedrunning, with the notoriety it's been gaining for the charity work with Games on Quake. They just did one for Hurricane Harvey last week. I forget how much money they actually raised. I think they mentioned it on Gamma Sutra.
Yeah, they were still going on as far as today, as far as I could tell.
Let me see.
They were at a few 100,000 last time I looked.
Now I won't be able to find it with my luck. But yeah, like with speedrunning, like watching people play at that level again, it's something that's very entertaining. It's something that you can tell that they put a lot of work into that. Oh, here it is. So as of the 5th, they raised $227,000 for Hurricane Harvey relief, and that was a few days ago.
Yeah, and again, that is very cool. And I believe that every time someone hears about that, they're like, really? Well, that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like one of the appealing aspects of it is that everybody has, well, anyone who's ever played a game has that game that they loved as a kid or even just a few years back that they thought they were really good at, and they can appreciate some of this stuff that people are doing. You know, you can, like, if you're a fan of Super Mario Brothers 3, there's an entire Twitch channel dedicated to the guy who owns records of that game, and that's all he plays. And watching that, it's like, oh my God, I didn't know you could do that. And you just hearing that there's all these secrets you never knew, and it kind of makes you harken back and wish you could play it again. But I feel like there is that that connection that you have with some of these speedrunners, and I feel like that is definitely a great point. I feel like that could certainly be there as well.
Yeah, like you said a really good point there, Rob, about being able to go back and look at games you've played and then experience what it's like to play at this level. Like, I was watching the Final Fantasy VII speedrun from this year's Awesome Games on Quake. Like, that's an 80 to 100 hour game. I'm going to bring this up when I do the presentation about. Like, I'm going to say, how many of you who play Final Fantasy VII beat it in like 50, 60 hours? Well, this guy beat it in just under 8 hours of continuous play. And I mean, there's just so much amazing work and preparation that goes into this. Yeah, exactly, Ogoro, that it really does elevate compared to just someone playing a game and being, wacky on stream and doing, because the people who play these games for like personal bests and world records, they're not jumping up and down and doing funny faces. They're just going like this, laser focus for like an hour or two, not blinking, trying to get through this game. Because like these are games where you mess up, a second mistake, and your entire run is over.
Yeah, and it did reach into that the public eye with that film King of Kong. Mm-hmm. That was where people got that first glimpse into how serious some of this gaming is. Mm-hmm. Because I mean, these are two guys who are in a lot of respects ridiculous, mm-hmm. but at the same time, you really get involved and see, well, these guys are amazing at this. They're the best in the world. And right now you look at it and you see, like, at least as far as I last heard, these guys aren't even in the top 5 because that kind of movie inspired so many people to just beat the hell out of that game. Mm-hmm. There's a lot younger people who own these records, and the game is passed on to new generations. And that is a huge, that is one of those things that we don't really bring up that much, and that is the history of games. Mm-hmm. Keeping a lot of these older ones is hard because technology does not support them so much anymore, but bringing them into the public eye and just kind of regurgitating these really, really old titles, it just helps in so many different respects. I'm sorry to keep jumping around in terms of topics while I'm in one sentence that I'm speaking.
But yeah, like, it's very hard, I think, for a lot of people to see what goes into playing these games, just like it's very hard for the consumer to see what goes into making these video games. I was just talking with my friend Trayvon again earlier today. We just did like an hour and a half podcast, and we discussed about that disconnect between the consumer and the designer, or the consumer and what it means to make these video games. Because for a lot of people, again, they see it as apples to apples. One game is just the same as another game, but that is certainly not the case. And as a quick bit, I guess, a promotional tangent here, the other goal I have up right now is that we can hit $200 on Patreon. I'm going to throw in a modern retro stream where I'll let people vote on a classic game for me to stream, or a few of them to stream, like maybe like every Monday or something like that, out of my GOG collection. So for those of you who were amazed at my backlog of Steam games, if we hit $200, you can see what I've been holding on to a GOG. Because there are plenty of games on GOG that I've bought that I don't remember ever buying. And probably games I have never played. Speaking of which, it turns out, that's interesting, The Suffering is now on GOG. That was one of my favorite games back in the day for survival horror.
Yeah, I have not played that. I've back in those days I played so few. I played Alone in the Dark. I played oh God, what was it called? Sanatorium. Sanitarium.
Oh yeah, I think I
That
have
was an
that on
interesting one.
GOG too.
Yeah, that's a good one. I really like that one.
Yeah, did you ever hear of Phantasmagoria, like the
I
infamous game?
did hear of it. I have not played
Me
it,
neither.
which is so surprising.
I own it, but I haven't played it yet. It's in my hopefully my to-do list. So I own about 256 games on GOG, and I think I maybe have played 10 of them at this
Oh
point.
wow.
Oh my goodness, so many games on here to look at. Oh, excuse me. But yeah, like it's definitely hard to get that appreciation. I think kind of tying this back into the game journalism side, as you said, it's kind of an uphill battle for professionalism because everyone views video games as, who cares about the video games? Just be a good writer. But again, akin to other industries, if I'm looking at an art critic, I expect them to have studied art. Like as you said with film, would I trust someone who has never been to film school or has never studied film in their entire life for a professional review on this game? And I think again the magic word in this is professional. If you want to go on YouTube or Twitch and just scream and yell about video games or movies, yeah, that's fine. You're not being paid for that, or you're getting paid through ad revenue or Patreon, but you're not saying you're a professional. But if you're working for any major site, or if your name is going to be attached to another site's part of their brand, there's some level of professionalism or expertise that should be tied to that.
Yeah, and I think this is going way back to El Gordo's comment about the lawyer thing. Lawyers have to pass a bar,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly what you had just said is studying, maybe getting a degree in college. Now that is also
Mm-hmm.
like a proof that yes, I went and did this, and I earned a degree. I did it for four years of my life, and certainly that is not required in reviewing. It's not required to be a journalist. It's not required for anything like that. But you do need that bit of expertise that you've earned somewhere along the way. And I do wish that there was some kind of like achievement or whatever to bring up a games term that you could get, that you could show off, that you could say, hey, this is what makes me legitimate.
Yeah. I would like that as well, but I just know that if we try to bring that up, I can just hear the critics saying, "Oh, so now if someone says, they haven't beaten Dark Souls, we can't trust them as a game critic," or so on and so forth. Like, you must play X, Y, and Z, or you can't be taken seriously. And like that's the problem. Like, I do agree. I think there should be some bar. There should be some measure of standard to separate you from everyone else, because if everyone can be a game journalism or a game journalist, then how do you make yourself distinct?
Well, it's just like in any career. Like if you take my games career, which is extensive, I worked on a lot of titles, but I have not. There would be no AAA company that'd be like, yes, we want you for our AAA game, because I've not worked on a lot of multi-million-dollar titles. In fact, I've never worked on a production capacity in any of them.
Mm-hmm.
As a tester, sure, but that's different. I've worked on education games. I've worked on gambling games. I've worked mostly on smaller titles. So that's what I'm able to do. If someone were to ask me to go beat Dark Souls, I'd be like, well, I don't know. To review Dark Souls, well, maybe, but I am not a Dark Souls player, so you're like, I would not consider myself. I wouldn't consider it to be valid for me to review something like that. I wouldn't consider it to be valid for me to call myself an expert in it. It would be like I can speak a lot. I can talk about like gambling in games, and I can talk about educational games at length, but I can't talk about AAA titles to the point where I should be considered an expert in them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, so far throughout this cast, like I don't expect someone to be 100% an expert at any video game, because again, to get to that level, like as I said, there's a difference between being able to play a game at a high level and being able to write and critique a game at that high level. And it kind of reminds me of a discussion I had a few years ago with someone regarding people teaching game design. And from what she was telling me, people who are teaching game design either come at it from two sides. Either they're a game designer who then goes into teaching, or a teacher who then moves into game design. Like, it's very hard to find someone who does both right from the get-go, or who's an expert in both. And I think that's kind of the same thing here. Like, if you're going to be, and I've said this before, professional gaming or professional video game playing is completely different from just about anything else out there. And just because you play games professionally doesn't make you a professional game journalist. But as we said a few minutes ago, if we take it from the other side, at what level of game playing do you need to consider yourself a journalist? Like, if you're an amazing writer, if you can, write a book, like nobody's business, does that qualify you to cover a video game? Even if it's a game that you've never played before.
Yeah, and I just make that analogy to modern to sports, the popular sports. How many times have we seen an athlete go on and become a commentator or an analyst, and they're terrible? Like, they're annoying to listen to, but they're there because they're famous. You would rarely see the opposite, a journalist going in and playing professional sports. That's not how it works. Journalists go to school, they study reporting, they study writing, they study research. Athletes go to school, they study plays, and they work out, and they know exactly how all of this stuff works and plays. But moving from one to the other, well, you're not going to get that professional journalism expertise. People expect it because you know the sport, but you don't know the rest of the stuff that comes with it. And when I watch some of these football shows that have like 4 commentators who are from the sport, they're coaches, they're athletes, I look at them and I'm like, well, they're just 4 guys hanging around talking about football. They're not actually analyzing anything. They're not presenting it in a way that people can actually grow and learn about how the sport works. They just speak about it, they get excited, they say whatever, and it's fun, but it's not journalism. And there's that big differentiator. And then the teaching is the same exact way. Yeah, you can be a game designer, you can be great, but that doesn't mean you can impart your wisdom in such a manner as someone can take it in and grow at the same time. Your work can be the point of study for a lot of people, and you can discuss the games you worked on in a way that few other people can. But a journalist is someone who researches all of that, compares and contrasts, and builds something up from scratch that designer may not even understand. And I feel like that is that important piece that isn't seen by a lot of folks, and it's really hard to make that difference known because there's no measuring tape to make that happen.
And as you were describing that, Raul, I was just thinking about this. One of the things that really makes video games different from any other medium or any other kind of sport coverage is the fact that it's something that the journalist can experience directly. Like, as you said, with football or soccer, you're not going to see a professional sport commentator get on the field and play, in FIFA or play in the Super Bowl. But when we're talking about video games, the way to cover a video game is you have to sit there and you're playing it. So even if you do the research and you do the study on it, part of that research and study is actually interacting with this game.
Well, and real quick on that point, a professional games journalist will know how to play a sport, and they could probably play it very well, but just not at that level.
No, of course. And that's kind of been like the main point about the main lure of video games, is that anyone can play them. You don't, like, again, this leads back into that whole idea of a bar. You don't need to go to school to learn how to play a platformer. There's no license to play Call of Duty that you're required to get. But again, like, this again goes back to this whole idea of professionalism. At what point do we say you should be this good or have this level of understanding in order to cover video games?
Yeah, it's a tough question. It really is. We've been speaking about it for an hour, and we haven't gotten any closer to that answer.
Yeah, and I don't think we are going to get any closer to this answer, at least for tonight. But I know we have to get going in a few minutes, so I do want to touch on at least our other topics. This will be hopefully a lot quicker than the other one. And this, of course, brings G2A back into our lives. So, G2A, again, the infamous key reseller site seems to be on and off again in the news. It looks like every 2 to 3 months. And they made a very interesting announcement this week that they are getting into the loot box economy. And again, if you don't know what a loot box is, it's the idea of the person will buy a quote-unquote box that can contain any number of various items. It could be something very, very crappy, dime a dozen. It could be something super, super rare, it's a 1 out of 500,000 chance that you'll get it. And in order to access a loot box, you have to pay a set fee based on the box. It could be $1, could be $5, who knows. And it's essentially akin to a slot machine. You put your money in, you don't know what you're going to get. But of course, the idea of the loot box is you get something. Again, it could be pure crap, it could be super rare. And it has become, it almost seems like a major foundation of free-to-play design over the last few years. Of course, gacha design makes heavy use of loot boxes, and it's actually, we've been seeing more and more of this in AAA development, which has caused a lot of people to get very upset. For instance, I've heard Destiny 2 has loot boxes, Shadows of Mordor has microtransactions. I don't think it has loot boxes, but the idea of having microtransactions in a $60 game, of course, is very annoying. It's annoying in free-to-play games as well. Killing Floor 2 is another example. They have loot box systems, and the problem with it is that it is very much akin to gambling, or it is gambling. The only difference, and what I think is kind of like that legal loophole, is that the person still gets something. If we were in a casino, I go to a slot machine and I pull it, I could get nothing, because that's what you're gambling. It can be 0 to $10 million. But it has become a very annoying part about it. So, bringing this back to G2A, they have announced their own system, as El Gordo is saying in chat, that you have to buy their specific currency in order to open the boxes. And the boxes themselves will contain game codes. And again, it could be some indie game that you've never heard of, that the game may be selling for $2. You could get a key for, who knows, Injustice 2 or Destiny 2. But of course, the different loot boxes have different prices to it. So like a cheap one could maybe be 10 G2A points. The most expensive one could be 100. And the other major factor is that the percentage chance, it's never equal. It's not like you have a 50% chance to get something rare or a 50% chance to get something common. It's more like you have an 80% chance to get something common, you have a 20% chance to get something rare. And I'm maybe even being even more generous with that. Sometimes it's down to like 0.5% chance you'll get like the uber rare thing. And we've talked about this before, but they've said in China now, you must disclose your probability chances for any kind of loot box or gacha design.
Yeah, I mean, that's how slot machines work. You have to do that. If you don't do it, you're going to be shut down.
Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to see if I can access the G2A without them giving me any trouble. Let's see. Alright, so loot 'em all. I'm on their precious little site here. Let's see what we got. Definitely not going to sign up. Okay, so we have games looted today, learn more. So we have boxes here. So here's one. So we have a box that costs 5 loot points. And I'm seeing screenshots of stuff like Dark Souls 3, Player Unknown. Oh, so here's like what they're doing. So they mix, of course, the high-quality games in with, of course, the games that I've never even heard of. So we have Rage Parking Simulator 2016 next to The Witcher 3. Or,
as it should be.
Exactly. Or Skyrim and Nier Automata next to Blood of Old, Caveman World, what the heck is that? Goo Cubelets, and then Goo Cubelets the sequel. oh, I'm sorry, there's 3 different goo cubelets, and so on. So now I'm going to scroll down. So their most expensive box right now is, okay, so here's one. Their biggest one is, it costs 100 points to do this. And we have The Witcher 2, next to Shadows of Mordor, Rocket League, Prey, Euro Truck. So this one, okay, so their highest quality one, basically every game in this list is a known high quality game. So the idea is you're going to get something of value, but it's going to cost you 100 of their, whatever their points, how much their rate is. Which I am not seeing the conversion, and I am not going to sign up to figure out what that is. But let's get away from G2A. I think I'm going to have to wash my hands after this stream. But
well, this is something we never really spoke of, and maybe it's something to go for, is regulations. That is something that has been discussed a little bit in games, mostly from a violence and sexual content kind of area. But in terms of things like this gambling-esque feature that a lot of games have, some of the addictive qualities that games bring up, a lot of people have discussed regulating them, because they do trigger that part in the brain that a lot of people can't control. Yeah. And so I don't know, it's a question that a lot of people don't like talking about, and they certainly don't appreciate the fact that it might impact them, because regulations aren't necessarily thought of as good, but they do have a place, and it's something to talk about.
Yeah, I know, like, again, this next topic is way too big to bring up now, but of course the discussion of a game developers union that has been thrown around for years now.
Yeah.
And oh my goodness, we don't have the time for that right now, folks. We are already past our normal limit. We bring that up, we'll be here till I have to get up and work at some point, so I can't stay up late tonight. But yeah, like as you said, Rob, that with something like this, especially when big money is thrown around like that, without regulation, it can lead to some very nasty elements. For instance, the whole CSGO skin, weapon skin, black market or gray market has certainly become very lucrative, and I've heard some very nasty stories about what's going on there. There's, of course, the infamous scandal earlier this year when 2 people were caught basically saying, oh, we're just marketing this website, it's so great, but they're actually the owners of the website trying to get you to go to their site and gamble. And when it comes to this kind of loot box design, again, it's such a weird thing to talk about in these games, because people will, of course, defend it and say, well, at least for the major games, that you don't need to spend it. But we always know that the game has, whenever you have microtransactions of this kind, the game has to be tilted towards it, or no one's going to even buy it to begin with. And the big question is, how much of the game has been superseded by the microtransaction?
Yeah, Steam itself is a giant microtransaction marketplace these days.
So getting back to something like with G2A, again, if it's getting the whole idea of like gamification, that we're now taking loot boxes and turning it into a product for a website. And again, like it's not illegal, but it feels like it should be illegal. That's like the weird thing about this.
Yeah, I agree 100%. It is tough to put your finger on sometimes.
And of course, the fact that it's coming from G2 after all the negative press they've gotten over the last year or so, or even more than that, it just seems very suspect. And again, like that list of the different games in their loot boxes, they're not telling you what the chance that you're going to get Shadows of Mordor versus some game I've never even heard of that I'm sure is maybe like $1 or $2 on Steam. Let me see here. I'm also going on Steam right now to see what else they're offering me in terms of weird stuff. Alright, well, it's actually pretty normal right now. Yeah. So for I don't have any weird games to report on Steam this time. But it's again one of those issues that it's only going to, I think, get worse until someone finally puts their foot down and says, we need to have some kind of law or legal precedence over this.
Yeah, yeah, it will, but it's probably not going to come from like an official standpoint. It might come from inside the industry, some kind of self-regulation.
Yeah, but I hate that because it means that without having something controlling it, of course, people will figure out a way to get around it. I mean, as we have seen many times over, when it comes to video games and gamers, if you tell someone not to do something, they're going to figure out how to get around it. Like, as a big case in point, Sonic Mania was released on the PC with the Denuvo copy protection, and it was already cracked like a day or two after its release. Like, you don't tell someone in the game industry, don't do it. Don't do something, because it will come back to bite you.
Yeah, I mean, we could, again, this is one of those things maybe we could go over, because there are things that we could probably figure out that might work, that people can get on board with, but I can't think of them off the top of my head, and that would require some thought and consideration.
Yeah. And I figure we should probably wrap things up in the next few minutes anyway, because I'm sure you have to get some work done. I have to do at least a little bit of streaming tonight.
Yeah.
But let's see. It's going to be very interesting. I've been playing some games that have been under embargo, so I can't talk too much about them. But I'm sure I can at least mention their name without me getting into trouble. So I've been trying out this game called Vaporum. Let me see if I can get the exact name of it here. Where are you on my list? Here it is, Vaporum. It's kind of like a steampunk Legend of Grimrock, which is very interesting. Like whole dungeon crawling, you have to move, and you have to turn at the different kinds of movement kind of thing. It's kind of like the old Wizardry games, that kind of RPG design, and it's very interesting. You only play as one character, so it's more about you trying to get around the levels rather than you building a party. So I'm under embargo, so I can't show anything of it until the end of September, sadly. But the other game, I was actually teasing about this on Twitter earlier, was I got a press key for the game Super Hydra. This is the game from Abbey Light Studios or Loco Malto. They did the game Cursed Castelia, which is kind of like a throwback to Ghosts and Goblins from back in the day. So this is his love letter to the shooter genre, like R-Type, Gradius, and stuff like that. It also has some really amazing music. And that one I am unable to show anything until the 18th of September. So I got two really great games I can't do anything with just yet, but definitely check them out. If you haven't had a chance, Rob, if you look up Cursed Castelia, it has some really amazing music, like that kind of like chiptune, but still like very gothic music to it.
Cool. I'll have to check it out. Cursed Castelia.
Yeah, if you search for the developer Loco Malto, I think that's what they're called. That should bring it up. What's going on?
I'm sorry, I'm looking.
Oh no, I was just reading the chat here. But yeah, definitely excited about that. I got another game. Oh, I got a press key for this game. Where is it on my list here? Was it Astral Travel? No, that wasn't it. Shoot 'em up. Where was this? It was for a survival game on Mars that I was trying to play, and apparently I bugged the tutorial by moving too fast, and now I can't play it. But it's never good when the tutorial for a game messes you up like that. Let's see.
Yeah.
Anything else here?
I'm watching the trailer. It's pretty cool.
I just got a key to some game called Morphite. So it's to be a sci-fi exploration first-person shooter. So that one I'm under embargo until the 19th. So I got all these games and I can't really show footage just yet. Yeah, exactly. I'll go to Cursed Castelia. It's all about Spanish mythology, which is really nice. And Super Hydra is it doesn't really follow any kind of mythology, but it's pretty cool in terms of it feels like a very elevated take on the shooter genre. Just like Curse Castillo was very elevated on that Ghosts and Goblins theme. And the developer released a game based on Greek mythology for free on his website. It was kind of like an old school throwback to like I want to say like Castlevania 1 maybe, or even something like Rygar or Ninja Gaiden. Very simple, but it was pretty good. I think I played it and I think I like beat it in one video like a while ago. But I know we are approaching an hour and 15 in, so let us wrap things up for tonight. I guess before we go, Rob, have you been playing any new games or streaming anything new?
Well, like I had mentioned, I switched to Torchlight 2. I started playing multiplayer this last Monday. So, getting into that kind of adventure. I haven't quite gone into streaming multiple games yet at a time. So every once in a while, I'll pull out like Roller Coaster Tycoon or Planet Coaster. But I'm very limited into because I'm limited into how many hours. I'm limited into what kind of games I want to get through. Because I'm going to want to get through them all like you do with Darkest Dungeon and such, but it just takes me a while longer.
Alright. Oh, speaking of Darkest Dungeon, they have announced another update to the game. They're going to add in another class, too.
Oh, no.
So that means I'm going to have to go back and play that again at some point. Oh, boy, that's going to be fun.
Yeah.
But, let's wrap things up for now. So you are still streaming on the weekends, correct?
Yeah, I did Saturday, Sunday, and Monday this last weekend. I want to try to get into daily, but we'll see how that goes.
All right. And for myself, I'm sure I'll probably be streaming something small tonight. Maybe I'll go back to Westerado and see if I can finish off that play tonight. And after I get done my work tomorrow, I'll be able to get back to some regular work with the writing and video. So I still have to think of a dissecting design for next week. But otherwise, let's wrap things up here. Again, Rob, thank you so much for coming on. And
No, thanks for having me.
not a problem, and I'm sure we'll be talking again on our Discord channel as well next Thursday.
Sounds good.
And again, if you want to catch Rob, his stream, it's twitch.tv/IndieVoyageRob.
Yeah,
And
check it out.
And if you want to hang out with us on the Discord channel, again, it is just simply for any $1 or more pledges over on patreon.com/GWBicer. Your donations will help go towards helping me support myself. And like I said, we have some new goals for $100 and then $200 this month. So take a look. With that said, we're going to wrap things up for this week. I'll be back probably in 20-30 minutes or so for a little game streaming tonight, with usually our regular streams around 10 Eastern. And we'll be back next Thursday, probably around 9:30 for our weekly chat. So, thanks again for watching. If you're new, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Check out Rob over on Twitch. And you'll be probably seeing me again over the week. And we'll talk to you again live next week. So, until then, folks, have a great evening.